Remember the Nightingale, Chapter 5. One day, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to own my own school. It'll be filled with girls twirling on their toes to beating drums. People will come from the forest and all the villages to watch us dance. Evariste's face shines as she lifts one leg, resting her foot along the inside of the other, and spins, raising her slender arms above her face. She touches the inside of her wrists together, and the setting sun sits between her palms, its golden embers casting her into a shadow. "You'll bewitch us all," Gaeton warns, watching her from his seat on the grass. From here they can see the path that leads to the marketplace and the low-pitched roofs of the villagers' homes. A quiet shaking blossoms in the pit of his stomach, like it does whenever he's near Evariste. An image of Amada, his baby sister, fleets through his mind. "I suggested that name," she confessed after the naming ceremony, "because it means beloved, and anybody who saw you hold her could tell. That baby girl is your beloved." Gaeton adores Amada. She often reminds him of Evariste. "Your name does not suit you, you know," he says, and a smile ghosts his lips when her dark eyes widen. She crosses one slender hand over her heart, pretending to be wounded, and falls to the grass. "You mean I'm not pleasing?" Though her voice was playful, faint uncertainty cast a shadow in the gold specks of her eyes. He lifts a shoulder. "Oh, you are. But what is pleasing? I think Lucy is a better name for you. Do you know what Lucy means?" Curious, she shakes her head. "It means light, and where you are, there is light." He speaks matter-of-factly, unemotionally, as if he were stating the color of the sky. Gaeton doesn't give praise. He states truths. Evariste soaks it in, saying nothing. Her mind is too busy replaying his words. "Where you are, there is light," to speak. Light brightens things, just as the sun floods the earth with brilliance and powers it with warmth. To remind Gaeton of light is to the finest compliment, she decides. Finer than being called pleasing to the eye. The apple was pleasing to Eve, after all. "Tell me about your school," Gaeton invites, picking a blade of grass from beside him. Evariste's eyes sparkle as she spreads her arms wide and lays on her back. The cool evening grass, her pillow, her eyes drift closed. It sits on a hill, and it has windows, big windows that let in all the sunlight. Memory's artwork hangs on the walls, and maybe I'll get her to draw a dancer. Her left arm lifts straight in the air, and she lets it sway back and forth gently. I'll keep the dirt floor free from debris. It will be nice and airy. And music, there's always music playing. Drums and tambourines, maybe a whistle. Children will come. I'm sure it will be mainly girls, but maybe boys too. They'll wear colorful costumes, blue and green, and the costumes will have stars on them. She inhales deeply, holds the breath for a moment, and starts to hum. "What will you dance?" Suddenly her eyes open, squinting, and she scrambles to her feet. "I'll make up new dances, my own dances to teach them. I've already made one. Do you want to see it?" Gaeton chuckles, her white smile spreading to him. "Yes." She pinches the side of her sandy-colored dress and bows. "It'd be better if I had some music," she warns. Gaeton looks around, reaches out, and grabs a stick. He stands to find a usable one. Gently, he raps the stick against the rock to create sound. Evariste giggles happily, nods. Her feet move. One foot forward, high on her toes. The other leg slides behind her. 1, 2, 3. The back leg slides quickly up and out into the air, parallel to her body. Her arms swing out, and she twirls on one leg once, twice, 3 spins. She drops her head, tucks her chin into her chest, and slips her body low to the left, her fingertips brushing against the ground. Her feet move faster. He matches the pace of her movement by striking the rock faster. Spontaneously, he offers a twill as if he were a nightingale, and it completes the orchestra playing for her. She leaps, crossing her right ankle behind her left, and lands on her toes, sliding her right leg forward to glide across the grass. He offers a high chirping sound, followed by a low, long whistle. Suddenly, without warning, she spins and drops to one knee, her face so near to the ground she might touch it, her arms stretched out above her head, her fingers grazing the grass, her chest rising and falling with the quickness of her breath. Instead of standing, she tumbles sideways, laughing. Gaeton stretches his arms behind him and tips his head. "You'll teach the students that dance?" "Yes, and more besides." And when he doesn't respond, she rolls up. "Well, what did you think?" "To start a school, I think you need a building." "Yes, that's true. I could build a hut. The Twa women might help me." He nods. "There are other things you'll need beside a hut. You'll need music. You'll be my music player." He winks. "You'll need a farmer. Crops, workers." "I will? For a dance school? How else are you going to eat? You don't have time to work the fields if you are teaching." She inhales deeply and looks down at the grass. "You'll need costumes, or a seamstress to make the costumes for you. You'll need fabric, imama. You'll need someone to help you with the finances. Are you going to charge the students?" "Well, yes." "How much?" "You'll need to know what it costs you to run the school before you can name a price. Most people around here won't be able to spend much for lessons. Would you accept anything other than cash?" "Could accept trades. That would help me with crops." He nods. "Sure." Silence falls and the sound of the birds chirping rings loud. "Do you think it's a silly dream?" she asks tentatively, concern flashing through her eyes. Gaeton lifts an eyebrow. "Do you think it's a silly dream?" "There are dance schools in the city." He nods. He starts to speak, but hears his name before he can. He twists his head in time to see his mother walking towards him, holding Amada. "Holding the baby. I've got to go see about that woman. Our child is due any day now. You'll look after her, won't you?" Mihira hands the baby to her son and keeps walking. She's checked on the neighbor every day for a week. Gaeton and Evariste exchange a glance. "They're like sisters, those two." Evariste smiles. "I'm surprised she didn't ask you to go along with her." Amada, only a few months old, stares up at Gaeton with huge eyes, her hand flailing in the air. Gaeton holds his finger out and she latches onto it, curling her tiny hand around it. When he smiles this time, it's relaxed, his eyes softening. Something about the pouty lips and big shiny eyes captivates him. "She's so cute," he breathes. Evariste smiles, nodding. "Yes, she is." "You'll make a fine father, Gaeton, one day." Arching a brow, he glances up. "Will I have dancing daughters?" She giggles, shrugs, a blush stealing up her cheeks. "Maybe," she sings. "But wouldn't you want a son more?" He shrugs. "Sons are useful." "And daughters?" "Daughters are dreamers." His tone sounds awed instead of dismayed. She clings to that. He rolls to his feet, holding Amada over his shoulder and walking toward the dusty lane. "Where are we going?" Evariste asks, catching up to him. "The creek. The water will feel refreshing." The walk to the creek revolves around Amada and Mamre. Evariste tells him about the stories Mamre loves. When Amada fusses, Evariste sings. Amada hiccups, sniffling, but not crying. Gaeton shakes his head, handing the baby to her. She smiles wide and runs the back of her hand over the baby's head. "Such a beautiful thing. You look like your brother." "I'm beautiful," Gaeton teases. Evariste rolls her eyes, shrugs, and whispers to Amada, "I hope you're not quite as arrogant as he can be, though." Gaeton chuckles. When Amada giggles at the funny faces Evariste makes, her tears completely dried, Gaeton says softly, "Lucy." "What?" "Oh," Evariste smiles, the memory of him telling her the meaning of the name Lucy. "Light. You make everybody happy, even babies." "Well," she says, bouncing Amada on her hip, "maybe it's all those dreams we daughters carry that make us happy." The early morning mist drapes around him. It is hard to see far. He's been here for hours already. well before sunrise. The cool temperatures make sitting in the same place without any movement bearable. He's waiting. This is the third day in a row he's come before sunrise, patiently waiting. Everything about this has to be right. Thick brush and vegetation surround him. Huge eucalyptus trees shield him from the day's coming heat. He sits on a boulder, knees slightly spread, the bow standing in the space between. He made the arrows himself. They are slung in a pouch on his back. They are sharp and fly straight and far. The occasional animal slinks through the brush or across the red dirt path that leads home. He knows they are here, the deer. Though he's not seen them the previous 2 days, he's tracked them, seen the narrow oval shape of their footprints in the dirt. Their dens are close. All he has to do is wait. Admittedly, he doesn't have much longer today. This is not something he must do for his family. Those chores come first. He will need to help his stepfather once the sun sets high. But until then, he'll wait. Crunch. The sound of leaves rustling draws his attention southward, just in time to see a doe step into view. But is she the right one? He barely breathes, his eyes assessing her skin. Spotless, golden skin, a young, healthy weight. Ears alert, long neck, narrow face. Dark eyes scanning her surrounding. No fawn tagging behind her. Beautiful. Moving slowly, he reaches behind him, removes an arrow and silently loads it, bringing the bow to eye level. He pulls it back. The weight of it makes his muscles quiver. She goes to the market once a week to bring back items for Imama. Mamrie doesn't usually come along, but this morning she's up for the walk. The sun sits high in the sky now, and Mamrie runs ahead. They talk of Charlotte and her calf. Evariste let Mamrie name this one, Bet. Bet remains Evariste of Mamrie, outgoing, mischievous, and full of adventure. Charlotte's other calves have not been quite as determined to escape the pasture as Bet. Mamrie thinks this funny. Evariste, Pappy, and Imama do not. The road to the market is red dirt and bracketed by aged banana trees. Open pastures come into view as they descend the big hill. Smoke rises nearby as the restaurant smokes pork for the day. The humid air wraps around the girls as they travel barefoot towards the village. Mamrie tells of the gecko to whose chirp she falls asleep. He didn't sound last night, and that's why it was so late before she fell asleep. When I did sleep, she adds, I dreamed of that gecko. Evariste tells her about Amada and how she loves being splashed by the creek water. As the brightly colored tents and people on bicycles come into view, the girls' spirits are high. Mamrie runs to a friend's tent, Evariste towards the baker's. The market is loud and crowded, even this early in the morning. People walk near her from every direction. Still, she senses it before she sees it. Someone watching her as she chats with the baker. She lifts her head and glances around. Faces everywhere. Most she recognizes. The baker laughs and places her bread in her basket. Evariste tries to shake the weird feeling off. These are people she knows. Still, goosebumps chase down her arms. She is being watched. Mamrie, she whispers, clutching the basket, moving from the baker's to find her sister. Processing the dough was the easy part. The hard part is scraping and tanning the hide and then stretching it. He waits for days as it dries, beats it, and stretches it more. After the chores and the work is done, he sits for hours at the back of the hut, hollowing the wood while he waits for the hide to cure. The hide must be just right. The wood must be just right. Attention to the details will make this perfect. It will make it last. The wood takes shape, broader at the bottom, narrow at the top, hollowed out just enough. And while he works, Amada lies beside him. She rolls over now. Soon she'll crawl, Imama says. Rolling over is worrisome enough. One day he turned his back on the escape artist and she nearly rolled off the porch. He caught her just in time. Imama jokes that he's always taking her along and that if he doesn't stop it, she'll just continue to get in his way. Only Amada doesn't get in his way. Instead, she makes the chores less heavy with her gurgles and baby smiles. Because daughters are dreamers. That's what Evariste said. What will you dream? Gaeton asks Amata. She gaggles back at him, making incoherent noises, and smiles a toothless grin. Well, he adds, whatever it is, I'm sure it's a good one. Mamrie scoffs when Evariste hurries her along. What are you worried about? Mamrie insists, yanking her arm away from her older sister's grasp. They barely spent any time in the market. Imama asked for a lot more than what you got, she warns. Imama's going to be upset. Evariste starts to reply when there's a shout behind her. Cockroaches be scurrying back to safety. Mamrie looks over her shoulder and huffs. Stupid boy, don't you know you're the cockroach? Mamrie. The boy is one they don't know. Instead of going away, he jogs up alongside Evariste. She keeps her face forward. Barely moving her lips, she says, Mamrie, go on home. For once, Mamrie doesn't argue. Instead, she takes off running. It is the longest walk of Evariste's life. She's made the journey from the village to home more times than she can count. But he calls her cockroach again, tells her she's a disease, warns her that the Tutsi killed his family and he wants to kill her. Evariste's arms start shaking first, but she grips the basket tight so he can't see. She fights the urge to run because he would catch her. Images of the Tutsi revolution flash through her mind. The Tutsi killed many Hutu. Mark, my brother's dead. She'd never forget the tortured cry when she found Gaeton on his knees in the middle of the road, clutching his younger brother Mark to his heart. Gaeton's arms, face, and chest were soaked in blood, and Evariste feared it was his own. She dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms round his shoulders, and felt him trembling. Part of him is different now. Part of him never got up off that ground. She thinks of that, lets it replay in her mind over and over again as the Hutu yells in her ear. She waits for the moment he strikes her. No one has ever struck her, but she knows it happens frequently to others. Outbursts are not uncommon, especially in busy places like the market. Still, she is unprepared when something wet hits her cheek. Spit. He spit at her. Afraid to unclench her fingers from around her basket lest he see her trembling, she chooses instead to keep walking. Her eyes flinch when she sees a movement beside her. She catches him scooping pebbles up from the ground. She steps to the side, but not quickly enough. Small rocks strike her. On the cheek, on her shoulder, on her arm. She stumbles, belatedly trying to step out of the way, and hears him laugh. Don't let me see you again, cockroach, he yells, jogging backwards away from her. She waits until she can't hear anything behind her to steal a glance over her shoulder, and when she cannot see him, she runs. Imama! Imama! Mamrie's voice startles a long-buried memory in him. He's screamed like that only once. He'd come to see if Evariste might walk with him, but she wasn't home. She'd gone to the market. Still, walking away from the hut, he turns and runs back when he hears her sister scream. He arrives in time to see Mamrie collapse in Akalisa's arms. Mamrie, what's happened? What's wrong? Evariste, there's a boy. He's calling her cockroach and following her. She told me to come home. Blood rushes to Gaeton's face as he yells, I've got it, and takes off down the path as Pappy appears from the sidelines to see what the fuss is about. Gaeton pumps his legs harder, his heart pounding in his chest, the roar of 1,000 winds swirling in his brain. Her name, Evariste, chants over and over in his ears. He'll kill anyone who touches her. The red dirt path, bracketed by thick brush on either side, seems far longer than it ever has before. He races past the open field, past the large eucalyptus tree in the pasture, and crests the top of the hill. As he heads down it, in the distance, he sees her, Evariste, running toward home. Her sandy-colored dress flows behind her, her arms pump hard. She has the look of a frightened mare about her. Frightened, but unharmed. Gaeton's feet kick up dirt as he flies down the hill, calling her name. The two meet in the middle. Her basket drops as her arms wrap around his neck. He cups her face in his hands, pulling her away from him. Are you hurt? She shakes her head. No. He didn't touch you? Rocks striking her skin flash through her mind, but she closes her eyes, shaking her head. No. He spit at me. She lifts a palm and touches her fingers to her cheek. Tears blur her eyes. Gaeton covers her fingers with his hand and pulls it away from her face. Who was he queries. She shakes her head again, laughing hysterically. I don't know who he was. I didn't recognize him. He blows out through his nostrils, his eyes moving above her head to stare at the path. Finally, he nods once. But you're all right. He pulls her toward him again, wrapping his arms around her. Evariste! Pappy's voice pulls them apart. Coming down the hill is Pappy and Imama. They surround her, checking to confirm she is unharmed. Safe and surrounded by those who love her, Evariste's panic subsides. Gaeton promises to see her on the morrow, and she allows her parents to guide her toward the hut. Imama carries the basket of bread now. Emotion makes her tired. After comforting a worried memory, Evariste seeks solitude. She steps outside the hut. Stars poke holes through the velvet sky, and a gentle breeze blows from the east. She hears Memory's gecko and finds a smile. He's back. She wraps her arms around her middle and stares off into the pasture, toward Charlotte and the other cows. Turning, she moves to sit, but there, just at the edge of the hut, sits something that wasn't there before. The starlight falls on something tanned, something cylindrical. What is it? An amanga! The drum is traditional, beautiful, tanned hide stretched across both ends of the hollowed-out tree trunk. These drums take weeks to make and are usually only played by men. It sits on a piece of bark. When she pulls it out, putting her palm flat against the top of the drum, she flips the note around and reads, "The first drum for your school, dreamer."